So let's do one that everybody knows. I've been working on the railroad all the long day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morning. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Dinah, blow your horn. Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah, strumming on the old banjo and singing fee-fi, fiddly-i-o, fee-fi, fiddly-i-o, fee-fi, fiddly-i-o, strumming on the old banjo.
Thank you, Emily. That was great. Now let's go to group view. I would first like to ask, as we go into group view, for Marcy Francisco, one of our essential workers in the state capitol, to make her comments, and then Stuart Bowley will be next.
Thank you, Graham. I'm really pleased to be able to give a shout out this morning to all of our great state employees. And this has been a challenging year for them, just as it's been a challenging year for all of us. We're in some ways lucky because a number of former state employees who had left during the previous administration reapplied for jobs. So they brought back that experience and background, and they're providing that along with all the state employees who hung in there. Several groups need special mention. I don't know if any of you have ever visited the labs for the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. They're in an old World War II hospital building on Forbes Field in Topeka. The legislature had a tour. They're very much in need of updating. And so we have a number of employees who are doing all the testing, you know, for our water, for diseases, and certainly for COVID in these last couple of months in a pretty uncomfortable space, and they're still all showing up to work. I also want to mention the employees at the Kansas Department of Labor. They found their workload increasing exponentially, both because of the increase in applications and then because of the changes that the state legislature made and the federal government made to the rules about unemployment. So they certainly have been working 6 days a week, working on some of their holidays. I know that they were answering questions on Memorial Day because I heard from some of the people who had called me. So I appreciate that. And also a number of employees from other agencies, the Department of Ag, were retrained to do some work for the Department of Labor. So that shows a lot of flexibility and willingness to help out our citizens who need it. And probably the last group that needs a great shout out is our public school teachers. They're not directly state employees, but we all fund them through our property taxes, and they have just been incredibly good about willing to come to work and not knowing what the rules are going to be, what they need to change, learning to try to help us all adapt and make sure in this really difficult time that a lot of our kids can still get an education. So I just appreciate all that, everything the state employees have done. I should also, I guess, mention our legislative staff. We continue to have some interim meetings, and they've been good to work with us and provide the information we need, and questions get answered even at the last minute. So.
Thanks, Marthy. Stuart will be next, followed by Paul.
Good morning, friends. This is Stuart. At the risk of doing a Rick Perry, I'd like to address 3 topics. The first one is city employees who were not able to work from home. As a city commissioner, I can do meetings from right here in my basement, but there are many city employees who simply can't do that. And in February and March and April, there was a lot that we didn't know. And what we knew terrified us. But these people had to continue to show up to work their shifts. And they did their duty by working through their fear. And to this point, we've had 8 full-time city employees affected by COVID. We've had 2 people in the police department, 2 in the utilities department, 1 in fire and med, and 1 in parks and rec. So I really appreciate all the work that these folks have done and continue to do through this pandemic. Second topic I'd like to talk about is the Unified Command. The Unified Command provided leadership to our community during the emergency that was declared by the governor. And the Unified Command was led by the county. The city participated along with the hospital and the health department. And through this process, they provided leadership, and our community responded very well to that leadership. And there are people alive today because of the leadership and the response. We kept the outbreaks low for a long time. Unfortunately, now we're spiking. But the benefits are not just having a low number of cases during the first part of the pandemic, but also the relationships that have been developed between the leaders of these various organizations and the knowledge that they've gained of each other and of each other's organizations and challenges. And I really appreciate the leadership that Sarah Plinsky and Craig Owens have provided at the county and the city. And the third subject I'd like to address is the police response, the Lawrence Police Department's response to civil disobedience and protests this summer. The challenge presented by the takeover of South Park and the expansion of the protests into downtown was significant for the Lawrence Police Department. And there was great restraint that was exhibited by them. At one point, we simply had to, I say we as the city, we had to gain control of the situation because it was in great danger of getting out of hand. And the response from other people in the community, we had a couple of people trying to drive through the protest. So it was a very dangerous and fraught situation. And I was and am proud of the response by the Lawrence Police Department. The courage that these officers showed by showing up to address the protests with their heads uncovered. Compare that to what happened in Buffalo and so many other places where the police department showed up with helmets, visors, shields, and batons. Look at the pictures of Lawrence and how our police department responded with their heads uncovered, their hands empty. And what happened from my point of view is that the police made the right call. They cleared the protests from the street, and then they allowed the protesters to regain control of the street from South Park to North Park streets. And they provided Jersey barriers to keep the protesters safe from people trying to drive through. And I think just as the Unified Command provided leadership and the committee responded, here, the police department made a good call and kept our people safe. So one last comment I'd like to make about our police department is that we have a relatively young department. About a fourth of our officers have less than 5 years experience. And we have an opportunity to shape the attitudes of these officers over the next several years. And how the community responds to our police department, you know, if we vilify them based on national events, that will have a negative impact on our community. We need to judge our police department and our city operations on what's happening locally. I thank you for listening. Thank you for the time. I'm gonna head on out. Sunday's one of the days I spend with my parents. So thank you. It's good to see you all.
Thank you, Stuart. Next, we'll have a poll worker, Paul, followed by a census worker, Paul, followed by a poll worker, Valerie.
Well, I thought I had begged out of this because the president's just declared that we're not essential workers. So, but shout out to the people that come around. We're all conscientious and turned in our census forms on time, I'm sure. But if any of you had us banging on your door, people have been great with just a few unpleasant exceptions. A lot of them seem eager to give the information. They smile, they thank you. I even got blessed the other day. I want to totally digress for a minute since it is Labor Day. And remember when I was a green freshman at KU and they had orientation week. And one of the things that I still remember was a Professor Oldfather, who I thought was really old, partly the name and partly because he was probably a little over 30 at the time, but strumming on his guitar and leading us in songs. And the one I remember was I Joined the Union, which I'd never heard before. And looking back, I realized this was the fall of 1952 when there was a hot contest between Adlai Stevenson and Dwight Eisenhower. So there was a political message there that I totally missed at the time. That's all I'll say. You're muted, Graham.
Thank you, Paul. Now it's Valerie, a dedicated poll worker, followed by Amanda.
Okay, a couple of tales here. One is I want to give a shout out to the work that Jeremy Shue has done as our county clerk. He has made the in-person elections as safe as they could possibly be, both for the voters and for the poll workers. There are plastic shields that were around the poll workers. There were pens that were given out that were a stylus at one end for signing the poll book and a pen at the other end for the people to vote with, and then they kept those pens. There were all kinds of procedures developed for things for people, for as much no contact as possible. I think it's only on provisional ballots that things were handed back and forth. And this time, after 16 years of working elections, I was the poll worker who didn't for the primary. And the reason for that was a service reason. I had found out that I had been exposed a couple of weeks before to somebody who was being tested for possible COVID. And the night before the election, and I talked to my doctor about this, and my doctor figured because of the way of exposure and the length of time it had been, I was probably safe to work the election. But I woke up that morning with, first of all, I found out the person tested positive the night before the election. The next morning I woke up with a sore throat, which was probably due to allergies, but I don't usually have sore throats. So my public services time was to call at 5:20 in the morning and say, I'm not coming. And then because of the two things, the exposure and the sore throat, I got a test that afternoon and I tested positive. I found out in 2 days. I mean, I tested negative. Thank you. but I was isolated in the house here for 2 days. But I will tell you this, I am planning to work the election, especially knowing the great care the county has done to keep everybody safe for in-person elections. I will be there, God willing. And so that's kind of my story. There were a number of people who were dedicated. The person, let me give a plug also, there would still be time to apply for and become a poll worker. Right now, it looks like they may have enough people, but there is training for that. You have to be available essentially at least half a day or a full day preferable. And then there's usually about a 3-hour training before, a couple of weeks before the election. There will be multiple opportunities to advance vote. There are going to be several drop-off locations for mail-in ballots, including, I'm sure, as they did for the primary, you can stop at a polling place, any polling place, and drop in your mail-in ballot if you don't get it mailed in enough time ahead of time. But let me know or just contact the Douglas County Elections Office if you are interested in volunteering. The place where I had been scheduled to work, and this time not as a supervisor, fortunately, since I had to cancel, was a place that had one person who was being a supervising judge for the second time and 3 brand new people. So there are a lot of younger people who are beginning to come out and work the elections, and I'm really glad to hear that.
Thank you, Valerie. And now we'll go to our transit workers, Amanda, and then Christoph.
Okay. Well, our drivers, I've been kind of watching nationally as things happen. In a lot of ways, public transit, such as trains and buses and whatnot, we tend to be a bit of canaries in the coal mine, along with hospital workers and healthcare workers. We're usually the first to start getting infected. The death rate across the country for public transit drivers has been pretty high, especially in New York when they were in the midst of their really high numbers. My drivers have been coming to work. We care about our passengers. We want to help our people. We are the main way that a lot of people get to work. We're the main way that a lot of those essential workers get to the jobs so that people can have the services that they want. And a lot of times my drivers are doing this without any sort of hazard pay or any sort of extra help at all. And that to me makes them especially brave because, like I said, we do tend to get exposed a lot more. One of the things that is a little encouraging for me, which is not, slightly transit related, the KU students are planning a strike tomorrow. They're going to go up on campus and strike because they want campus to close down. They see the numbers growing and they're scared, and I don't blame them. And this is something that I think all of us should support, because these students are taking more responsibility for their own health and their own care than the administrators of the university are, it feels like. This is something that I highly support. Unfortunately, it's not legal for us to strike out at the bus company, because I know a lot of us have been thinking about it a little because we want some better protections. But the company is trying. They have been taking some steps to keep passengers safe, and that's a good thing. But yeah, I'm proud of my drivers. They come to work. They put their lives on line to help get people where they need to go. And they have done an exceptional job. They have stepped up admirably and taken extra shifts and done what they need to do. So I'm proud of my drivers.
Thank you so much. And now we'll hear from one of those drivers, Christoph. Please unmute. Christoph, unmute. Press your space bar.
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm on the steady door, and I really don't have much to add. You know, I'm just a driver, and I feel really, personally, I feel quite safe. We have a quite high standards for drivers and crew, which disinfect the buses on a regular basis, almost like hourly. Every hour there's a person coming with a sprayer. Basically, that's a job. So I personally, I feel really safe, and I appreciate the work of administration. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Christoph. And now, before we take a little break, let's hear from our social workers. First, Dee Boyd, and then Ann Owen. Press your space bar. Dee, press your space bar.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I have to hold my space bar down. Anyway, okay, I work for the East Central Kansas Aging Agency, and it's located, for those who don't know, in Ottawa, which is 30 minutes south of Lawrence. And we serve 6 counties: Anderson, Lynn, Franklin, Miami, Osage, and Coffee County. And we serve people mainly over 60 years old. And just to give you an idea, so some of our main services is that we have 4 case managers who do assessments for people who want to be placed in nursing homes, or frail or disabled elderly people who need home services. And those assessments are required by the state for them to get all those services. We also have 24 nutrition sites which serve meals to people. They can either show up at the site and eat, or they have grab and go meals which they can take with them, or you can either show up at the site or you can get home delivered meals. And also we have various services that we offer people, like we help pay utility bills, we give them farmers market vouchers, etc. We have 15 employees, and we did work from home March, April, May, and came back in June. My personal opinion is that we could still stagger people coming to work and staying at home, because we all touch the light switches, the copier is all touched, the postage machine, the faxing, and we do try to wipe them down, but you know, and then people walk in for our services, and so we wipe down the counters when they leave and the door handles and stuff. But we do wear masks around each other, except when we're in our office areas. And of course, it does get a little lax, because people tend to forget when you're working so close and you need to talk to each other all the time. And we do have a conference room that you can social distance probably about 10 people in it. And they have board meetings there and various other training sessions because we do Medicare stuff. And a lawyer comes from Kansas City once a month and meets clients there. Sometimes we have them, sometimes we don't. And we do take everybody's temperature every day, twice a day, of our employees. And people who come in the building and pass beyond the lobby, we take their temperature. Yeah, I guess that's.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. And now Ann Owen.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, to clarify, I am not a social worker, I'm a psychologist and work in private practice. I feel lucky. I didn't know I was an essential worker. I mean, but I feel lucky to be able to have I'm somebody who can keep on working and able to work at home, even though I'm paying rent for my office. But I'm just here in the corner of my bedroom where I hang out and see patients through telemed. Yes, it's a quilt. Whoever asked me that. Okay. My caseload has really grown. Everybody is just stressed, as I'm sure all of you can attest to. And I have a consultation group of other psychologists and all of us are full. So that's too bad. People are increasingly stressed out, especially I'm noticing in the past month or so. Parents of young children, parents of school-age children, professors at KU, students, this whole, I'm so glad to hear, Amanda, about the strike at KU. I would imagine that a number of professors would like to be there too, in it too. I don't know whether they feel able to or not. So, just regular human beings are utterly stressed out. And then people that have pre-existing conditions, it's really, really challenging. I have a few clients who have contamination OCD about germs and stuff. And, they're really suffering because how do you know where the line is, right? And, also kind of depending on how much Trump has been talking, women, especially who have sexual abuse histories or histories of being in relationship with narcissists, they can just get really triggered by him, his gaslighting and lying. And anyway, you know what I mean. Oh, I wanted to say, I realized that a year ago on Labor Day, or the Sunday before Labor Day, was the first time I came to UUCL because I remember Amy singing "Working 9 to 5," and I thought, wow, this is a really casual church. Like, I'm in for that. So, oh, there's my dog, Gracie. So that's kind of a cute story that Gracie, my dog, she usually comes to my office with me, and I have kind of a wide chair at my office where she sits next to me on my left side. I don't know, she just established that. Well, here I'm in a very small chair and she still insists on being on the left side. And so I'm kind of like squinched over as much as I can be to the right side so that she can be there. And it's just one of those silly things like, why don't I kick her out? But it seems like this is her job. So I guess that's about it. Like, I appreciate the recognition, although honestly, I just don't think, I feel lucky to be able to do my job, and I feel lucky that I don't have to worry about bedhead on the back, and that I can just, wear shorts every day and nobody knows. So I'll pass. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ann. I'd like to say that as we know, Amanda Batachan is a registered nurse, and she approves of what we're doing this morning, but she and her family are out of town this weekend. Speaking of songs, we're going to hear from Emily Russell, and then some labor issues will be discussed by Lawrence Bodel. So Emily, if you could cue your second song. And then
Let me unmute myself here if I can.
thanks. And then after that, we'll have an interview with Lawrence Bodel.
Oh,
You're all set, Emily.
okay, you can hear me. Somebody unmuted me. Good.
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. Well, I'll tell you, I was kind of torn about, I didn't feel that we needed the gloomy songs, but you know, so I wanted to do Union Made, and I also wanted to do, what is it, 16 Tons, which is a gloomy song, I guess you'd say, depressing. But we'll try that first. No, except I can't read it. Well, let's try Union Made. That's a little more fun and a little upper. And I want to tell you what this reminds me of. I don't know if anybody remembers Rosella Pratt, that she was a union organizer in Chicago. And I always think of her when we sing this song. There once was a union maid. That's too low, too high. Once was a union maid who never was afraid of goons and ginks and company things. And the sheriff who made the rule went to the union hall when a meeting it was called. And this is what she said: "Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die." This union was wise to the ways of company spies. She'd always organize the guys. When a meeting was called, and this is what she said: "Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union till the day I die."
I'm sticking to the union.
Thank you very much. And now I'll ask Lawrence to unmute. And Lawrence, you've had a long tenure with your wife in the fellowship, which is now the congregation. And I wanted to ask you, how many years did you actually work in Lawrence, and for how many companies?
Well, it's a really difficult question to answer, put in those terms. I worked out of the union from age 20 to age 62. That's 42 years. And a great deal of that was in Lawrence, because if there's any work in Lawrence, I turned down work out of town. As a matter of fact, I tried to have jobs that were close enough to home that I could come home for lunch. The first part of my career, I had no experience, no training, no qualifications to be an electrician. The result, I got fired a lot of times because I was incompetent. And the union would keep sending me out to other jobs. And eventually I learned enough that I could stick to the job. Part of the difficulty was if I had a problem, it's hard for me to go around it and find something else to do. I finally got to where I could put it aside and do something else until a solution showed itself. I worked out of town away from our union, which had jurisdiction all the way from Olathe to Junction City, and north, I guess, to the Nebraska line, I don't remember, and down including in Emporia. I worked in Manhattan a couple of times, a couple of weeks at a time, and Junction City once or twice. Worked in Kansas City some, which is out of a different local. Worked in Olathe some. But basically, I worked right here in town. And you ask how many firms I worked for, I don't even know. The first 10 years, I probably averaged 5 firms a year. That'd be 50. The last 30 years, I worked for Huxtable, period. Nobody else. But, and kind of an aside, he was the best person to work for that one could ever imagine. He never once complained about what I did, how I did it, when I did it, what it cost, none of that crap, I feel, pardon me, that I often got from the other employers. I did basically banks, schoolhouses, churches, and restaurants, very little residential. I did do one 12-unit apartment building, did the First Presbyterian Church, University Lutheran Church, Prairie Park School, a whole bunch of school additions, St. John's School. That was a handy job. I walked home for lunch from that job. To give you an idea how close to home I worked, 2 years in a row, I kept track of my mileage all the time. 2 years in a row, I drove my truck less than 3,000 miles, and that included going home for lunch every day. So I had lots of jobs that were close to home.
Did you supervise as well as working, for example, at the Kennedy School, at the St. John's School? It sounds like you were probably a supervisor.
I worked by myself. I had help at St. John's for a very brief period. An old man who should have been retired. He no longer had any confidence or any memory. But I did have people work for me various times. I had a young man working for me at, well, I use that term rather loosely. He didn't work at all out at the First Presbyterian Church. And I didn't actually fire him. I just told him to get lost. And I never heard what happened, whether he went to the office and got his check or he never got his check. Nobody ever said. I never saw him again except shortly after I fired him. I guess you'd have to call it that. I saw him in uniform driving a Lawrence police cruiser. And then I saw in the paper where he got a commendation for Policeman of the Month. And a few months later, he was gone. I don't know what happened. I'll spare him I won't say who he was.
Do you think Lawrence, do you think workers are paid better today, or were the relative to the economy, or did union workers do better back years?
The union constantly allowed the wages to go up, caused them to go up. But relatively speaking, my wife worked as a nurse with a college degree and a great profession. She got exactly half what I did. Every time she got a raise, I got one that was twice as much. So it was always half as much. She was basically way underpaid, worked extra hours with no pay. And I told her when the time came for her shift to be up, she ought to just go home, but she wouldn't do it. That was my union attitude showing through. I was not a staunch supporter of the union. On the other hand, I benefited from it greatly.
Insurance?
What?
Insurance?
Yeah, we had great health insurance, still do. We have full coverage, dental, visual, medical, prescription, and I think for the two of us, it costs about $300 a month. That's a bargain, and great retirement too. my retirement from the union is more than my Social Security. So since we're very frugal and don't spend much, we're in great shape on that. I don't think you asked the pros and cons of the union, but I'll go to that a little bit. One of the cons, they always insist that every man's a good man. This is back in the days before there were any women in the union. And that's not true. Some of them are just old drunks. They shouldn't be on the job, especially in a construction job, much less an electrical job. But they kept sending those guys out to other jobs repeatedly. And I benefited from that because, as I said earlier in my career, I had no experience. And they kept sending me out till I finally learned enough I could stay.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Now we're going to interview some of our, Lawrence, thanks again. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. I was glad to be on.
We're going to interview some of our educators now. And at the end, we'll conclude with another song from Emily.
I can't figure out what is in front of me.
I don't see Amy Burgeon. Is she on this morning? And also, how about Terry Locke? Amy Frost works in food service at Baker, and she thinks we're doing a great program, but she's not available to talk to us this morning. How about Pam Slauson and or Tom Geyer? Are you on this morning?
I think the teachers are all so tired that they're just sleeping in today, Graham.
And
That must be the case. Hang on.
You're muted, Graham.
I'll list the others, including Mary Holm. I didn't see her screen.
I saw Mary.
Mary, are you here?
I am here, Graham, but I am tired. Good point.
How are they meeting in Oskaloosa regularly or hybrid?
We are meeting in person. We have, in my 18 students, I have 4 who are remote. So I'm sort of teaching 2 different classes because my teaching doesn't translate well to video. And, you know, I resonate with what Dee said about how easy it is to get lax on the precautions. So, but we're doing the best we can, and it is great to be back with the students.
Thank you, Mary. Now I'll ask Mike Wolf, followed by Rachel. Mike, are you still with us?
I saw him earlier, but I don't see him now.
Okay, Rachel, if you'll go ahead, please.
Hi, everyone. So I am in student affairs at Baker University, so I cannot speak from the faculty side of things. You know, I honestly, I have to kind of echo what Anne was saying. I feel incredibly privileged. You know, I happen to, Baker staff have been back since June or so in the office. And, you know, that has just really looked, obviously during the summer, you know, things are pretty quiet. There's not a lot of people on campus. The way our office is set up, it's been pretty easy to be socially distant from one another and follow some of those precautions. with a small university like Baker, it's been a very I think that it's okay to say that it's been kind of a, you know, shoestring operation, a lot of trial and error, and you know, I think that it sounds like it's been a very different experience from what I've heard from folks at KU, but again, you know, I feel like I've been able to. It's like Mary said, it's kind of a mix of, yes, I'm worried that students are back on campus, but I have, you know, I can't say that I haven't missed them, and it's been so wonderful to have them on campus and to see, for the most part in my experience, a lot of students taking the precautions seriously. They're really invested in making sure that they can stick through the semester and, you know, continue to pursue their education. But yeah, I also have a lot of feelings about how this has been handled on in higher ed as a whole in our country, and so that's I have those concerns, but also again pairing that with just really glad to see students back, and we know that it was a long time for them to, you know, head home early and be kind of torn from their college experience so abruptly in the spring of this past year. So.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm now going to list the names of some other educators that I don't see at present. That includes Courtney Vogt, Chris Brown, Jennifer Ball, Maggie Childs, Tom Cravens, Aaron Grant, Amber Watts Hall, Jeff Hall, Christina Ilhoff, Shada Johanbani, Kareen Ullum, and Brian Vansel. Are there any other educators that would like to make a comment this morning? If so, please, Laura Lynn, I'm sorry, you teach French, you teach Italian at KU. I'm sorry. Please.
Yes. Sorry, I was trying. My classes have gone very well. I'm doing everything online. My class is classified hybrid remote, which means we need to have 1% of classes on campus in person. And I'm going to be doing those when they have oral exams one-on-one. So I will never have the entire class at a time. I was really concerned about developing camaraderie, besides just not knowing how the teaching was going to go, because that social aspect is really important in my classes. And fortunately, that has gone very well. The very first day, one of my classes went great. Another one, I actually had to shut it down because there were so many tech problems. We just couldn't stay connected and hearing each other. And I was really upset about that because, you know, I want to establish something the way it's going to feel the first day, and it was a disaster. I'm very happy not to be on campus. We've been assured the safety measures that there'd be somebody at the door and you could not come in unless you had your temperature taken and submitted other health information. I've been on campus. I've been in campus buildings, I think 4 times since this started. The last time for an appointment in the Kansas Union, the first day of classes, I have yet to see any of that in place. Nobody asked me for anything. There was nobody even at the door watching people come in. So I'm pretty glad to be home.
Thank you very much. This time, I'm going to ask anyone who has a question or a comment to please raise your hand, and you'll be recognized, and we're anxious to hear your thoughts on this day before Labor Day. Marcy.
Well, I should also just mention my husband, Joe, as one of the great laborers that I know. He retired after working for Kmart for 39 years, but he was also a custodian for the schools. He started working for Parks and Rec when he was 14 in a summer jobs program, and then kept his job as a custodian nights when he was working at Kmart. But I remember the year that Kmart had a vote on whether they would join the union. And the administration or, was very against this. And after the vote failed, they gave everybody a 1 cent raise for the next year, just because they were so mad at them for having that vote. I, of course, convinced him that he should vote in favor of it.
I was pleased to see that, I'll go to Paul in a second. I was pleased to see that our so-called garbage trash removal people are voting to unionize, and it was a success. And I think that's a step in the right direction. And Paul, you have a comment.
Well, I had a short experience with union in New York State that I won't try to detail here. It wasn't my best experience of my life, but just like to point out, I think one of the most serious downsides of Republicans' things they've done over the years on the long term is the way they've undercut and really suppressed unions. That has a long-term effect. That's one of the reasons that wages don't keep up with the economy and so forth. And of course, that's deliberate and very aggressive ongoing program.
Thank you, Paul. Do I see any other hands?
I'm just going to go in.
Well, Lynn Bodel.
Okay.
You're muted.
Please press your space bar.
There we go. When I was quite young in my career, I was working nights at Lawrence Memorial, and my night supervisor asked me if I belonged to the American Nurses Association, and I said, no, I can't afford to. She terrified me, this woman, and she looked at me and she said, you can't afford not to. So I was a member of our nursing union for the rest of my career. And I still was only making half of what Larry did, but still.
A well-taken point. Marcy?
I was just going to mention, again, during the Brownback administration, we talk a lot about the tax experiment, but a huge change was taking a lot of classified staff and making them unclassified so that they were working at the will of the administration and could lose their job just by getting a letter and we're left with no protection. So I don't know how we're going to rebuild our civil service, but that's an important thing that I think the state should focus on.
Speaking of labor, my timekeeper has gone on strike. Does anybody know what time it is?
It is currently 10:33.
Okay, we can officially conclude this wonderful session, but stay online until 9:45 and let's keep talking. Thank you all for attending, and we'll look forward to seeing you at 11 o'clock. Emily.
What?
You're muted.
No, that didn't work.
It did.
I got you unmuted, Emily.
Now you're going. Okay, Emily, go ahead.
Well, so anyway, you had me scheduled for a song, and I'd already decided I didn't want to do a gloomy labor song, like 16 tons or something. But I had one for the teachers and students. You want to hear it or not, or do we have time?
Yes, we have time. Please go ahead.
John McCutcheon's song. Of the things I learned is, I'm sorry. of the things I learned in school. I remember this the best. Don't hurt each other, clean up your mess. Take a nap every day, wash before you eat. Hold hands, stick together, look before you cross the street. And remember the seed in the little paper cup. First the root goes down and then the plant grows up. So anyway, because I used to be a teacher too. Head Start.
Was that at the Little Red Schoolhouse?
No, this was the Children's Hour, which, you know, was, it came out, the Children's Hour came out of the NAACP Education Committee. And several of us remember that. Many were drivers, you know, we'd go and it started out in different church basements. And then we got to use what later became the Ballard Center basement, which used to be African American school when we were back in the segregated days. As you know, Lawrence has quite a history.
Yes, and it's good that we can deal with it in a responsible way.
Go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'm Carol Enos. I grew up in a family that thought unions were wonderful because my father worked for a refinery and they were unionized. So I've always thought that that was very helpful for the worker. However, in Binghamton, New York, when I was teaching, I had a negative experience with the union. They seemed to foment problems and create things that didn't need to be problems. And I think that's something that people who run unions must be careful not to do, because it's not helpful really. But I still think unions are great for the worker.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I wanted to ask Rachel if Baker was playing sports this fall. I'm kind of appalled that so many universities, the football team seems to be more important than the classroom. I know that's always been there, but it's really showing up this fall, it seems to me. Is Rachel still with us?
Yeah, and actually I don't know the latest on that. I do know that the information has been changing almost every day with the particular association that we're in. And I know that sometimes the work that a particular team can do is also impacted by how many students are sick or in quarantine, as well as just different categorizations for different sports. So like the way that tennis is going to be treated is going to look different than football and those kinds of things. I know that they've announced no spectators at Baker. And again, I think the ways that they're moving forward with each sports just look really, really different based on the way that the association that they're a part of. So some of that is Baker policy and some of it is through their regional association.
Thank you.
I'm a little confused because I believe yesterday they said KU would play football with nobody in the stadium, but at K-State, they're going to play with spectators. Maybe somebody can straighten me out. Whatever, it shows a lack of unified policy coming down from above. Although I give our governor great credit for trying to make sense out of the situation. Laura Lynn?
I have a brief union comment. I basically do the same work that GTAs would do, but I'm not a student, so I'm not a GTA. And GTAC is the union that represents them. And I see them fighting for the same thing over and over and over. They're pretty active, but I think there's probably a problem there in turnover because they're students. And so all their leadership has to be fairly new. So I think that's a problem at KU also.
I don't see any other hands up, so I'll say that perhaps it's close enough to 10:45 that we should adjourn until 11 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for their participation and see you in a few minutes. Oh, wait a minute, John Brewer.
John, I don't think we were able to hear you, but I think maybe I heard that, or I saw that you were saying that you were waving goodbye.
That works. Bye-bye.